Hello and welcome. This is now our fourth of these online sessions. At the minute, I'm sure I'm just talking into a camera, but hopefully we'll have more people joining us. We are trying out a new setup with technology, so we'll kind of have a little bit of toing and froing as we kind of work out how that goes. So we switched over. We're now recording through my phone, which will hopefully give better sound and better video than we had on the previous setup. So hopefully that is reflected, that you're actually hearing what I'm saying and can see me. Partly I apologise that you now actually get to see me rather than a grainy digitalised version. This does mean also that I don't have a flea in my ear today. That bit's all gone because that was my phone, and instead I have a laptop set over here with Michael on the other end of that. So hopefully he will be able to shout out, and not only will I be able to hear what he's saying, but you'll all be able to hear what he's saying as well. So you can be nice to Michael, lovely guy, probably more knowledgeable about all this than I am really. He will keep me right, but also he will be seeing what's on your screen and able to relay that to me in case we have questions as we go, and we'll try and do a bit better than we did with them last week. We did manage to solve the issue about going back last week, so that's in the comments if you want to go and check out the answer to that question. Before we kick off today, I just want to take a few minutes and go through something that's kind of important to us. When we train normally, the Bartitsu and Antagonistics Forum, we normally meet in a place called Prohibition Cabaret Bar in the centre of Newcastle. It's a bar, as the title would give away, kind of a small, independently run bar. It's got 2 live stages, really focused on not just live music, but live events. Obviously, they've got kind of cabaret acts, so they also house a burlesque troupe. There is a improvised comedy group that operates out of there. There's stand-up nights. There's the Hound Club, bring your dog along and have a pint with your dog at the pub. They do a whole lot of really good stuff. The problem is, obviously, they've closed down at the minute because of COVID-19. Now, the staff have all been furlonged, so they've still got jobs for the minute, and there's all kinds of stuff working around to help the bar stay open. The problem is there's going to be restocking issues when they try and open up again, as well as depending on how the grants go from the government, it may not be enough to get them started again. So what they are doing is they're trying to raise a bit of money in order to keep the bar going. We would obviously like to support this effort because they're our venue, and if they disappear, we need to find another venue. They're also lovely guys doing really good work, putting together a bar that isn't just a chain like every other one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the link that they've put up down in the comments, so you'll be able to pick that up. But I wanted to mention it here to draw your attention to it so that you're aware of what's going on. They're doing quiz nights, which they normally do on a Wednesday night. So if anybody wants to join in, they're doing that via Facebook Live for a donation. So go do a pub quiz, throw a donation in. Okay, you're helping a really good cause. They're also selling drinks vouchers for when they do get back running again. I think they're £5 or £10, and you exchange them for a drink or 2 drinks, dependingly, and any excess is a donation to what they're doing. Of course, above and beyond all that, you can just give them money to support them. But what I'm saying is they're a really big help to us in getting our event, our society up and running in Newcastle again, having moved from Sunderland about a year ago. So it would be really great if anybody out there wants a good cause to support. Prohibition Cabaret Bar. I said link will be here, and I'll be putting the link up on Facebook on our page later on today. Anyway, that was me waffling, and I'm hoping that a few more people might be turning up as we're going through. So, as I said, this is our 4th session. We had our first session, we looked at a bit of hand warm-ups, we looked at warm-ups, and then we looked at a bit of the pugilism form. Second session we looked at cool-downs and the other bit of the pugilism form. Last week we were looking at the first part of the Savate form, as well as, what else are we doing? We're doing offensive combinations, so good combinations for attacking people with. So today, what we're hoping to go over is we're going to start off and we're going to look at the second half of the Savate form, and then we're going to have a look at some defensive combinations. Okay? Because realistically, Bartitsu set up as a self-defense martial art. We don't actually want to be the person starting the fight. Okay? So if all you've got is 101 ways to kill the other guy, you're not really practicing a self-defense martial art. You're practicing thuggery. So what we want to look at here is some self-defensive ones. So these mostly start with a block or a void or some way of stopping being attacked and counter-attacking into that. It fits much more within our ethos of what we do, so that's why I wanted to focus on that this week. So that is where we are. So, right, I will start as we said we would start every class. We shall fall in. So, attention, and fall in. Right, okay. I've done my warm-up, so I think really we're ready to get straight in and start having a look at the form that we were looking at last time. So let's do a bit of a recap. I'm going to lose the hoodie because I'm going to start moving around now, and we will talk about the form. So, last time, hopefully some of this will look familiar to you. We started off with a chassé lateral BAF in at the low line, up into a avant chassé frontal. From there, we looked into a fouette coming round, lifting the foot for an inside block, and then stepping off at 90 degrees. From there, we're going to do the same thing, but on the other foot. I'm going to turn round, so I'm now facing away from you, just so you can see what I'm doing. So, from here, I've got that same low line kick, high kick, but this time I'm coming through with the verso chassé frontal, so I'm kicking through, and then I'm blocking low, and again, turning my back to you down here. Now, that, if you have just tuned in and missed all of the other sessions, was a random series of movements and you're like going, what on earth is he talking about? Now, the idea of forms is to string a combination of moves together in a way that's easy to remember and teaches muscle memory, and students can go away and practice on their own time. That's what I'm doing here. This is not me saying these are a great combination of attacks that you should do in a fight. This is just something that you can go away, practice, and start to build that muscle memory. And it all builds around Savate, so as you'll see, a lot of it involves the legs and the kicking, because the Savate is the French kickboxing that we're talking about. I'm just trying to do slight recap, so I'm sorry for those of you who have seen the other parts, but this gives you a chance just to get back to where we're talking about. So that was the first half that we've looked at. So we've got these kind of low line attacks coming in as the starting attack to the shin, and then up between the legs, just destroying stance and all that kind of stuff. We had a fouette in there, a nice kind of sweeping kick where we're trying to take the other person's leg out as they're moving away. What else do we have now? We have the foot block, so if somebody's coming through with the coup de pied bas, kind of really low kick, we looked at this little weird turning of the foot to catch that. And then we looked at the whole thing on the other side, except instead of the fouette, we had the verso chassé frontal. So this is the front leg coming from the front kick coming from the back leg, so that's through, right the way through as a big kick. And then we looked at that low line, catching something on the midline and moving it off to the side on that low line block that we're going to be using quite a bit if we're defending against kicks coming straight at us. So that should hopefully, if you've seen the third session, all be a kind of recap. So what I want to look at for the next few minutes is to start unpiecing that, the next section of this. Now, as I've said in all the videos, and I'm going to say it again now, go at your own pace, okay? You know your bodies better than I do, so don't train harder or easier than you can, okay? Obviously, you know if you bust up, if you've got a bust up back like I do, and one dodgy foot and a dodgy wrist, yeah, I don't want to be trying to do amazing parkour stunts that are going to cripple me for the rest of my life. But at the same time, I don't want to be going, I can do a push-up. Yeah, great, I'll just do a push-up. That's not actually pushing me. So I need to train at the level that's about right for me. And you'll know what that level is. There's a couple of moves here that are a bit more stupid. So just be aware that you need to go at your own pace. Okay, so let's have a look at where we've come from. We've turned, we've done this low line block and that turn and back to guard at the end of the last session. So from this stance here, the next thing we're going to do is actually we're going to look at a block. And that block is just an upper block coming in here. So if I'm facing you and I've got both arms on line, that's my block. Okay, it doesn't seem like much, but essentially what I'm doing with my guard here is I'm creating, you either have to attack me over or under that triangle. Yeah? If you're attacking under, I'm going to scoop it out the way. If you're attacking over, I'm going to block it up. Again, I'm not blocking here. I'm very aware I'm short. I only need to block at 4'3", 4'3", 5'3", and knock a foot off my own height there. to make sure I'm blocked, okay? So above the triangle, I go up. Below the triangle, I go down. Now we've looked at the down last time, but I want to spend a moment looking at this upwards block. Because it's very easy just to kind of turn it into this weird sweepy up motion. Just almost backhand punch it out of the way. This is not great. Partly you'll see it leaves my hand way out here when I finish that movement. I'm really open, as opposed to where I want to be here, still closed, yeah? If I do my block and something goes wrong, and I've still got a fist coming in here, I've got that almost, I've got options, yeah? Whereas if I'm here, and that punch is still coming in, I have a broken nose. That's what I have, okay? So I want to keep it nice and close into my body. Also, what I'm doing is I'm not just lifting my arm up, I'm rolling it. And that's important for several reasons. One, if I do it sideways, I get to almost punch up the middle. This is almost like a tiny little uppercut that goes from here to here. Yeah? What that does is it starts to move all that power upwards, which is where I want their blow to actually go. So I punch up a little and then roll. So I punch up a little and then this bit almost gets locked in three-dimensional space, and I roll my elbow up. From there, round to there. So it's up and it rolls around. The reason for that is I'm going to try and catch it and then use that upwards and forwards momentum to actually push the hand up, because I need some force behind that technique. I can't use my legs. I'm going to use that twist to do it. Also, if you feel your own arm, right the way down from your little finger, there's a bone that runs all the way down the back of here, which is your, I'm going to say ulnar. Somebody who's more medical than me will probably correct me. I think that's your ulnar. The bone there. So what we're actually going to do is roll and push that bone right into the underside of their arm. And the idea is that with a little bit of percussive force in this, so I'm not going to go, I'm going to throw that out, bang, bang. I'm throwing that bone up into their arm as they punch. So that punch comes in and up it comes. And that will really hurt, basically. So what we're doing is we're causing them pain for the audacity of deciding to punch us in the first place. So that punch comes out, up goes the hand, bang! And I can do that from the backhand as well, just as easily. And then I come straight back to my guard. Okay, it's an important thing to learn because your straights and your crosses are going to go above that triangle. So that's what you're going to be using to catching them. Your uppercuts and a lot of your kicks are going to be coming below the triangle. That's where you need to know these kind of techniques here. There's a few things that really come outside of that, such as hooks, but we looked at the hook counter. If you remember from the first form, we've got a hook counter if somebody's coming with a big swinging one at the head. So really the only bit we haven't covered at the minute is how to deal with a fouetti, which is a big sweeping crescent kick coming in at the side of me. We're probably not going to cover that in great detail today, but yeah, essentially for now, step backwards out the way. Wait for a better attack, okay? There are other ways to deal with it, but we'll come to them another day. The important thing is not to try and catch them because they're coming in and it's the force of their leg against the force of your arm, and you lose that one, so don't do it. Right, so that's that block covered. So I've covered exactly the very first move of the next section is that block coming up there. I'm going to pause just for a second. How is video and sound going? I'm hoping to hear a disembodied voice when he catches up. Well, it could be a while. I'm not hearing anything.
Sounds really good. The only issue is because of the light. When you move closer to the camera, it gets light, and then if you move further away, it gets dark.
Ooh, right, okay. I will try and stay close-ish to the camera, but apparently there are light and dark issues. I don't know if you can actually hear Michael from the way he's facing, but okay. Hopefully you will just have to forgive us for that. Hopefully it's still better than it was previously, which was the main thing. Right, okay. So we've got that first technique. We're going to block up. From there, once we've done that block, we're going to come through with that coup de pied bar that we've talked about before. I'm going to lift that back leg, and I'm going to come through and stamp on either the shin or the kneecap of my opponent. So I'm going to block up and then stamp through. Ideally, as I said, I'm looking for kneecap, break that, hit the kneecap, bring it up into the shin, hit the kneecap, drag it down into the shin, or just hit the shin and drive straight down the shin in a really painful, what we call purring. You just slide it down and cause a lot of pain but very little damage. So, we've looked at that kick before. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. The important thing to remember is to keep, sorry, I'll go this way, it's probably easier to see. My hip has to stay back. Yeah? So my hip is back, I kick and back, my hip is still here. I don't change the line of my hips. Yeah? The importance of that is, if I do this, my upper body stays in the same place. If I change my hips, my upper body moves forward. So it's really important to do with your distancing on how you're facing off against your opponent. If they're trying to punch me, I can come here, that kick there, I don't actually move closer to their fist. Okay? I need to be aware that if I do this kick, I'm now a foot closer to my opponent. And that really changes the dynamics of the fight. So for this kick, if you're doing it, keep it nice and back. So we're going to block, kick, and then as we recover that foot back and that hand coming down, we're going to throw out our cross. Okay? So, block, kick, cross. Yeah? And what we're doing, we've blocked, we've kicked, and then as we're coming back, that's their chance to start closing in again. So we want to make sure there's nothing, they're not following into that gap that we're creating, because we're going to fill it with our fist moving forward. So if they come onto it, that's great. They're providing us more power to the punch that we're throwing. So, block, kick, punch. Block, kick, punch. Okay? And it can be really strong, because as you've blocked, kick, you can really plant that foot and use it to throw that fist out. So you can get a good solid punch on that one. Back to guard again. Okay, hopefully everything's clear enough so far. Once we've done that, the next move that we're going to throw in there is a chassé lateral. So it's another one of these kicks. Chassé means kick. Lateral means sideways. Okay, so frontal forward, fouetti round. This one we're looking lateral, so this one goes out sideways. So this kick is that one. For those of you who know it as a side kick or whatever, this is probably the most important one to get the chamber right. Now we have looked at a lateral when we've looked at a lateral BAS. This low line kick here. But this time we're looking at it at the med level. So rather than the BAS, the low kick, this one should be about waist height. So to do this, I've got to bring my knee really up and across my body. Yeah? And then kick out sideways and back. It's really hard to do it in slow motion. If I actually face you, you will notice as I chamber, I basically turn my ass to face you. And then kick out and back. That's what I'm looking for a lateral kick. So from here, the chamber comes up, the kick goes out and back. And you'll notice I counterbalance the kick going out with my body bending the other direction. Yeah? So the idea of this one is normally either as a stop hit, somebody's coming in at you, you can get that up and happening in a very small space in front of you. So as they're closing in, you're planting a foot in the stomach and pushing them out of the way. So it can be used as a kind of stop hit when somebody's closing. The other thing, of course, if somebody's moving away further, you can add a cross step into that. Sorry, I'm going to step away again for a second. Where I'm coming through, turn and kick, and I can chase somebody down with that. Much like the fouetti, but if they're moving even faster, I can get a cross step and a kick with quite a bit of power and covering quite a bit of distance as I close down my opponent. So it's a useful kick to know that's a lateral. So far we have block, kick, punch, back to guard, pull, lateral, back to guard, and from there we're going to do a fouetti. So we're coming round, but again, rather than last time, this was a fouetti BAS. We're sweeping the leg. This time it's coming in much more waist height. Ideally this will turn into the toes going into the genitals. If you're really flexible, it can turn into a solid hit to the ribs or the stomach, doing some kind of winding damage. But it's also moves us a stance forward. So it's also what we call a pass forward. So when we're talking about movement, we can advance, we can retire, and we can pass. Yeah, I change my hips and move forward. the fouetti does that for me automatically. So it's a good way of gaining ground, closing in on a fight. People don't like a fouetti, so you can use that to get in close before you move into doing something with your hands. So that's where we throw the fouetti in. Okay? So far the second half of our form looks like this. We block, we kick, we punch, we pull back, we do the lateral, and then the fouetti. And we've moved across here again. Hopefully that's all making some kind of sense. I'm just going to have a quick check of comments. It's just people saying hello, that's fine. Right, the last move in this section is where we encounter the first of what I'm going to call the stupid moves. They're called that because they're in for the sake of completeness, they're in because they look flashy, and they're in because they provide you a bit of a workout if you're going through this form several times. They are not kicks that I would recommend you ever use in a fight. This one we're about to look at, which is a mule kick, I think I've used maybe 3 times in sparring in my entire life. The other one, which comes right at the end of the form, I have never used in sparring. I've never even attempted it in sparring. But it's there, as I said, for completeness, and also it gives you a bit more of a workout. So, stupid kick, number 1, is the mule kick. And this is where I'm going to kick out directly behind me. So if I turn sideways, what I'm going to do is, rather than the lateral, where I would be sideways and kick that way, now I'm actually facing full away and I'm kicking out directly behind me. Yeah, so if you think about a mule, a donkey kick, where it's kind of rearing up on its front hooves and kicking out with the back ones, that's pretty much what we're doing. So from here, I lean forward and the foot comes straight out behind. Okay, this normally happens where somebody's moved, you didn't expect it, and you end up facing backwards. The real worry is they're going to get behind you and start trying to choke you out, or something like that. So what we want to be able to do is just fill that gap with something offensive to stop them closing in at you. So you turn around, you're like, oh, I don't know what's going on. Right, that's bought me a few seconds to turn around and face my opponent again. If you want to go one step further, and this is how I would recommend you do it in the form, is rather than just turning and kicking out, you're going to go down and actually put your hands on the ground as a counterbalance to the kick. Really hard to try and do that since I haven't done it for a while. So from here, I'm going to turn, kick out, and back. If you want to get really energetic, you can go to a full donkey kick or a handstand kick if you're pretty much you, and I imagine is the only person watching this video who might be able to do it. Put both hands on the ground and then kick out with both feet behind you up in the air. Devastating if it lands, utterly embarrassing if it fails. But it's there as a potential. So in terms of where it fits in the form, got block, kick, punch, lateral, fouetti, and I'm facing you guys as I'm doing it, mule kick. But when you come back from that kick, you're coming right the way through and then turning in the opposite direction. The reason for that is just simply that it's going to carry us on round our square of Savate. So this is taking us from side 2 to side 3. So if I'm facing you this time, I've got my block, my kick, my punch, my lateral, my fouetti, my mule kick, right the way through and round. Does that make sense? Hopefully it does. As I said, it's not a kick to get caught up on, but it does teach you turning, bending, getting back up, moving around. It works on all of that balance. Lots of stuff that's really important to delivering good kicks. But in and of itself, not a kick to learn a lot of time. Sorry, spend a lot of time learning. Okay? It's just not worth the effort. But that takes us halfway through the second half, if that makes sense. So what we want to do from here is we've just turned the corner, and exactly as we've done in every other form, we're going to do more or less the same techniques, but on the other foot. Okay? So, if I've just done that one as I was doing it there, which foot, clear here, block, kick, punch, lateral, fouetti, mule kick, I'm now the other foot facing forward. So I can block, kick, punch, lateral, fouetti, and then we come into stupid kick number 2. Now I'm not going to spend I'm not going to spend any time looking at those techniques again we've already looked at, because it's exactly the same techniques, just with the other foot forward. I mean, it's important you can deliver a decent kick, decent punch, decent attack, whatever, from both sides. So that's the only reason that's in there, and it's also just driving home that muscle memory and that intellectual brain part of you that's meant to be doing when you're fighting, that thinks about what you're doing as well. So you're used to doing it on both sides, and it drives that in. So, stupid kick number 2. Number two. I can count. That's 1, that's 2. Stupid kick number 2 is a leg sweep. Okay? And it's really stupid. Essentially, you're going to drop down to the ground, throw one of your legs around in the hope that it's going to go through your opponent. I'm going to try and put an extra bit of light on, see if that helps the situation there. We'll see. So, or it's going to make it worse. I don't know what it's going to do. So, this time, we're going to drop right the way around and swing underneath. And it's designed to be used against somebody who's mid-step, so they're not particularly well balanced, and you can really just welly a leg out from underneath them. If somebody's coming in with a fouetti, whilst they're on that one leg, round about here, about to deliver that kick, you can drop under the kick and take that back leg out. If you're incredibly fast, incredibly flexible, and your timing is impeccable. Otherwise, you will either fall over and present a prone target for them to stomp on, or you will be slow and get kicked in the side of the head, turning what would have been a relatively sore but non-lethal rib kick into a potentially knockout head kick. Neither of these are good. I wouldn't recommend it. But for the sake of completeness, this is what it looks like. It's also the reason I have mats out here, because I have to go down onto my knees, and this is pebble-dashed concrete, so I'm not that much of a masochist. So after I've done that kick, from here, we had our block, kick, punch, kick, kick. Now from here, in order to perform my sweep towards you, what I'm going to do is turn and face the opposite direction, and go down onto one knee. I'm on the wrong stance for somehow. How have I done that? Because I started on the wrong stance right back when I started. Sorry. If I go back to the beginning of stage 4. Sorry. So I've just done my mule kick. Boom. Come back up. I'm facing here. Block. Kick. Punch. Lateral. Fouetti. Now I'm in the right stance. Now I'm going to turn and face the other direction and drop down onto one knee. From there, this hand goes to my side, and this hand, I'll do it again from the other side so it's more obvious, goes through my leg. Leg comes up, sweeps through, and the momentum of that brings me round, and I stand back up again. So from here, if I can get my legs the right way around, it should be something like that. Which looks very flash, and if your timing's brilliant, it can be really good. What tends to happen is anybody who relies on this technique gets injured a lot, and even if you hit, you can really mess up the back of your leg, because you're essentially dragging your heel sideways across, which is fine if you hit them with your heel. If you hit them badly and get the Achilles tendon, potentially the back of your calves, all of that can really mess your legs up. So again, I wouldn't recommend it. But to give you an idea what it looks like from the other direction, if I start this way, I turn and drop to one knee, hand to the side, other hand underneath my own leg. That leg uncurls, goes through, the momentum drives me around, I stand up. Okay? It is a stupid, stupid kick. But it's there, and it looks pretty. So, that takes that last part to then be, if I start in the right stance and get it right this time, block, kick, punch, lateral, fouetti, leg sweep, back up. The final bit, just to finish the entire form, I come back up from that, a pak sao on this side. We've talked about that before. It's really just covering everything. Yeah, so I'm just, rather than offering up the side of my ribs, my kidneys, my head, if I don't know what's there, pak sao, and then I'm going to turn to complete me back to exactly where I started and back up to guard. Okay? That should take me through a full square of 4 sides. Okay? So, the last 2 parts we've been looking at, and I'm going to do them here because this is where I'm going to come to when I do them as part of the full form. We start after what we were doing last week. We're back to guard. Block, kick, punch, lateral, fouetté, mule kick, round. Block, kick, punch, lateral, fouetté, leg sweep, pak sao, turn, back to guard. Okay, that's what we've learned today. Hopefully that makes some degree of sense to at least somebody out there. I'm hoping if any questions are coming up, Michael will interrupt me. Right, where are we going next? I'm going to do the whole thing. I'm just trying to buy a second to catch some breath back because it's surprising how much this one takes out of me. Right, actually maybe it's possible. Sorry? Oh, he's gone really quiet. Why has he gone quiet? Okay, anyway, right, so what I'm going to do is go through the whole form. So I'm starting here, in my guard. This is the stuff we looked at from last time. Hopefully this is looking familiar. Now we're on to the new stuff. And that's the form in its fullness. And I'm going to do it again at a slightly different angle, starting here, and hopefully you'll see a different bits of it from different angles, and hopefully it will make sense. So let's start from here this time. I'm in guard. Where am I going? Okay, and that is the second form in its entirety. It's about 25 moves, same as the first one. So hopefully what that does is it builds that muscle memory, gives you a bit of a workout, and it gives you, when you break it down, those individual components. Those individual kicks, those individual blocks that we can then tie together to actually make something useful out of. So it's a training tool, and if you followed all 4 videos, you now know 90%, I would say, of the pugilism and savate moves that we use regularly. There's a few weird and wonderful things out there. We pull in some bits from Chasson. I'm going to talk in a little while about Monsterey, very different way of doing pugilism. These things sneak in, but those 2 forms give you the core of what we do. So hopefully you followed along, you at least get the mental aspect of what it is we're trying to do. We shall leave that form there at this point and move on to Duncan Rambles a bit as I grab a drink and a book. In particular, I wanted to have a bit of a chat about the random other form of pugilism that we study quite a bit. So what you have seen through the first form and what we've been looking at so far really covers a very Barton Wright way of looking at things, very old style school of pugilism. It's very good for what Barton Wright wanted to use. It works very well when integrated with the savate, and because the hands are very high, it's really good for getting in there and getting those grapples that you need to turn things into jiu-jitsu. it's not actually that brilliant of a system if you don't have all that other stuff to back it up. So quite often when students come in and start training with us, one of the first things we'll teach them is Monterey, which is a form of boxing which is on its own, without anything else added to it, pretty good as a street defense form of boxing. So that's why we teach it. And it all comes from this guy here. Give you a nice close-up. There you go. Colonel Monterey. Colonel Thomas Hoyer Monterey, to give him his full name. Very interesting chap. I would wholeheartedly recommend this book, partly because it's a really good training manual, partly because some of the stories in it are absolutely amazing. I mean, it's told largely by himself, so I would take all of it with a grain of salt, but if even half of it's true, it's amazing. So anyway, I'm going to tell you a bit about Monterey. Partly I'm going to tell you a bit about him as a man, and partly I'm going to tell you a bit about what his training, what it is, the boxing, the differences from the pugilism we've looked at. So, one of Monterey was a Dutch gentleman who started his military career with the Russian army. He joined the Russian army as a fencing instructor. Now he was born, I want to say 1840, something like that. Died kind of 1901-ish. I'm not great with dates, as you may have noticed. But so, you know, we're still talking a period where most infantry are armed with a sabre. So that's why he was actually hired by the army to teach this. He suffered an injury, don't really know what the injury was, but he was forced to retire from the Russian army and went to Copenhagen. Whilst in Copenhagen, he had an illegal duel and killed a man with a sword, which forced him to flee, and he left the entirety of Europe behind him and went to America. When he got to America, he tried to sign up with the American Army as a fencing instructor and a bayonet instructor, but they wouldn't hire him for some reason. So instead he joined up with the US Navy for a short period and then kind of went independent and seemed to just drift around all of the major conflicts that happened in Southern America at that time. Basically as a soldier of fortune, duelist for hire, and basically fought his way around South America for a while. Later on he settled down, opened up his own fencing academy in America, and really spent the rest of his days there. He finally died at about 70 odd, and his biggest complaint was that in the last couple of years of his life he developed cataracts and couldn't fight anymore. At 70 odd, that was his main complaint. And he died, leaving behind him I think 8 kids. So clearly a life well spent and well lived. Some of the things were quite interesting. He had a belief that there were 3 core things everybody should study. You should study swimming, you should study boxing, and you should study fencing. The first 2 of these, he said, were because they were a life skill. You should study swimming because you might at some point need to swim. If you fall in the river, you fall in the sea, whatever, you might need to be able to swim. Okay, so that's a life skill and everybody should swim every day. 2, boxing. Everybody should box every day. Again, it's a survival skill. If you end up in a fight on the street and you're not armed with anything better, or you don't know anything better, you should know how to use your fists to defend yourself. 3rd one, fencing. Again, everybody should fence for a couple of hours every day, according to Monterey, because it teaches coordination, it quickens the mind, and it's a good form of exercise for the body. Now, I would query this because most people I know who fenced from a young age into early retirement have broken backs, broken knees, because of that constant strain. So I would query slightly whether the 3rd one was actually true, or just coincidentally because Monterey was a fencing instructor looking for students. Hard to tell. But anyway, those were his things that he very firmly believed in. His other thing that I found was really interesting was he started tutoring or training this fencing student called Ella Hatton. She, first of all, was a she, and that stood out as quite a big thing. So he trained her up and then took her around Europe arranging kind of what we call prize fighting or show bouts of fencing, where she is catalogued as defeating over 60 of the best men in Europe at that time, both on backsword on fencing on foot and fencing from horseback. She became known as the Jaguaress, and was really just kind of opened up a whole world of fencing to women at that time. So Montserrat, whilst a lot of his book, if you read it, he is maybe old-fashioned in some of his views, particularly if we come to things around race, he was, however, very, very forward-thinking in terms of the training of women. So that was some of Hutton's highlights of Hutton. He has some great stories in there about one where his mate tries to kill him whilst they're on the way home, and he gets stabbed and the knife goes through his arm and into his chest, piercing a lung. He beats off 3 men with a walking stick, walks 100 miles to the nearest village and gets patched up, and is really annoyed about it because it stops him getting to the pub on time, or something like that. You get these wonderful tall stories about him as well. Whatever you think about that, we can have a look at what he taught in terms of pugilism. Very different kind of stance to what we've looked at previously. We've looked at a very defensive stance. Get the hands right the way out there and defend. Montserrat, much closer to the body, and one hand carried really low. Now this hand is your defensive hand. And this hand up here, that curls up beside your body and points forward with the fist, seems really awkward. His logic to this was, if you carry a gun, you point the gun at the guy you want to shoot. If you carry a knife, the point of that knife points at the guy you want to stab. I've got my fists and I'm in a fight. The fist I want to hit him with is pointing at the guy I want to punch. So that's his logic of having his hand up here and the other one lower down for defense. So this becomes Montserrat's guard here. Very kind of different. And then what he's going to do is, rather than delivering a punch as we would do by using gravity down, he actually starts these punches quite low, drives them up at an angle, and then twists his whole body and extends through it into these big punches coming through here, and from the other side, here. Now, they're slower, but heavier hitting. And his argument was that really what you want to do is you're not trying to score points, you're not trying to tap the other guy, you're trying to get him in a position where you can deliver one of those punches and end the fight. Yeah? Just take him down, put him on the floor. Okay? So what he's looking for instead is, for punches coming in, he might ward that punch off on one hand and step to the side. So if you imagine the other person's arm is now being pushed across, presenting their side and their head in front of me, and then delivering that up directly underneath the ear into quite a powerful uppercut under there to finish the fight. A very different way of fighting. A lot of it is about, you know, they've got that kind of roll, catch and position, open up a line and strike through it. It's slower, but it is much more heavy hitting than what we look at normally, and it's really good just for that self-defense. You've got a good amount that you are covered in terms of where you're blocking, and it's got these really powerful hits that come into it from there. And he also does a lot with kind of slipping punches, which we might have a bit of a look at later on. Really good way of fighting, and we teach it as a self-defense form in and of itself to a lot of our newer students. So I just wanted to cover that because that's Montserrat. I'm checking the time and realising I'm going way over time today. So I'm going to try and pull this back, and we want to look at some defensive combos, was what I said we're going to look at. My memory's not great, so I'm going to check with my lesson plan. And you thought I just made all this up. Right, one of the things we're going to start off is, if we're in our normal guard and a punch comes in, we're going to use that upward block that we've looked at before. Now, the logic of that would be we'd throw that and then we block, throw a reply down the line. So we'd get a block and then a cross. Cross. Which is great, but what happens is I block, then cross. At which point they block and cross. And then I block and cross, and it goes on forever. Nobody actually scores a point or wins the fight. So what we want to do is try and actually throw the timing. So what I can do is throw those two techniques at the same time. So rather than block and punch, I throw a block and a punch. So I'm protecting myself at the same time as delivering damage to my opponent. Actually, the first time I encountered this was long before Bartitsu. This technique I first encountered in Praying Mantis Kung Fu, where I think it's called Gua Choi. Pronunciation's probably terrible, something like that. It's not a unique concept. We also find it in fencing when we start looking at two weapons and you'd have a parry with the dagger at the same time as you would lunge with the sword. Just messing with the timing, but we can do it in that fist fight as well. Block, punch back. Right, okay, next one. What are the defensive ones that we did? All right, okay, yeah. So I'm looking at 3 that come off this lead block. So the next one, we've got the block across here. Rather than using the other hand, which is what's being expected, yeah, they're going to expect block and a punch down here. So they're kind of prepared for that. So rather than doing that, I want to drive the attack on the same side. So I'm going to block and then come over into what we call a hammer fist. Okay? So what I'm doing, normally if I was doing a hammer fist, I'm going to throw it round and try to land it somewhere around here with a big solid hit. What I'm actually trying to do here is, after I've done that block, is drive my hand forward so that my forearm hits against the neck. Okay? It's not a hugely debilitating punch, but what I can do is drop my whole body weight into it. Block, forward. From there, if I can get the elbow in there and just drop everything down, it's not so much damaging, but it moves them. It pushes them down. Okay? And if they're staggering, they don't have the initiative. I'm keeping the initiative after the block. So I'm going to block, keep the initiative, and then fire through with my hook. So that way, I'm safe, I'm keeping control on a line they're not expecting, and then delivering my punch through to actually finish the attack. I think the next one is very similar in some ways. We're going to block high, and they're expecting that punch through, so we're not going to deliver it. Instead, after that block, we're going to do a quick avant chassé frontal. Yeah? So we block, and we kick them. It doesn't have to be hard, just a gentle tap to the nutsack is enough to create that moment. And if they're there, they're not attacking you. They're not defending, they're not paying attention. Block, nad shot, cross. And also, I can use that falling back from my kick to drive home that punch. So block, kick, and that lands at the same time. So I can put more weight by doing almost a drop step as part of my recover from the kick. Block, kick, punch. Okay. I also want to look at some low line blocks. Yeah? These kind of ones. But I'm going to have to check my list again, because my memory is not that great. Actually, we're going to look at the same thing, and I'll explain why. This is very similar. So as the punch comes in, but this time it's coming on a lower line. Whether it's a punch, or more likely that's going to be a kick. It's going to be a quick avant chassé frontal, it's going to be a quick lateral coming up into my stomach. I'm going to catch that and move that. So they're now facing me with their legs open, because I've caught and moved it to one side. So as they land, that's when that comes up between the legs. So essentially, they're going to kick at me and it gets, so I'm going to kick at them and that leg gets moved over here and they land. And that's when my foot is coming up in between the legs. So from there, block to the side, quick hit up, and then again drive that cross through as they're doubling over, opening up the side of the head for that cross. Okay? So we're going to move, quick nad shot, drive the cross in. Okay? I'm going through these quite quickly, but hopefully they're making some kind of sense to you. Where are we going next? Right, just to try and link this back to what we were looking at last time, we're going to do again our block coming in. So it's that same kind of kick and we've moved them out the way. This time, rather than taking advantage of those open legs, we're actually going to close into the space with another hammer fist. But this time, we're moving a pass forward to drive that fist in. And it's coming in, almost imagine if you had a knife, you're trying to stab them in the side of the neck, you just don't actually have the knife. So from here, we block low, we step in with that hammer fist, and the reason that that is driving in keeps that hand high. We can grab them, and if you remember back to, I think, our first session, we have an Osotogaki. The leg can go round, and we can drop them down, and we can throw them. I think it was the second session now, I think about it. With a little bit of distance so you can see my feet, I block low, step in with that hammer fist, grab, snake the foot round that leg so I can hammer it down, forcing their leg to flick up and push them with a throw on the ground. So again, that becomes block, hammer fist, grab, snake, osotogaki. Or more likely, at a bit more of a reasonable speed. That was terrible. Let me try that one once more. So, okay, taking it into a throw. The last one, I think, very rarely actually happens, but it's a great one if it does. If that same kick comes in, and it's coming down the centre line, rather than blocking it this way, I can block it the other way and move the leg over in this direction. Okay? This means rather than facing me, they're now got their back to me. Okay? So if you imagine, before I kicked and my foot went that way, and I'm open and facing you. This time I kick and my leg goes that way, and my back is to you. Yeah? So that's the difference. If I can catch and move you that way. Yeah? From there, I'm going to, where am I going? Yeah, move that one off. So I've moved that to one side. I'm going to then shuffle forward into an uppercut. It's not really an uppercut, okay? It's what we call a shovel hook. It's kind of a 45-degree angle. So rather than straight up as an uppercut would be, it's coming slightly across, but it's that same motion. So we're going to block it off to one side, step in, and that's going after they've moved right into the kidneys. So move them offline, hit them in the kidneys. From there, you've also shuffled in. So you are closer and they're literally standing there. You can do exactly what you were worried about earlier when you were doing the mule kick. You slide one hand around their throat, the other hand comes round and your hand goes into your elbow. That hand goes on the back of their head and you push forward on their head and back with this arm, and you basically squeeze their neck until they stop wriggling. Okay, it's called a rear naked choke. It's in like every martial art. It's really difficult to explain what I mean without a second person here, but we're in isolation, which is why I'm doing these videos to start with, so I don't have another person here who I can casually choke out. If you want to come and see me casually choke people out, that's fine. Come along after this is all open. Prohibition bar, which we're going to save, and I'm sure I've mentioned. And if you don't know what I'm talking about with the Prohibition Cabaret bar, go back and watch the beginning of the video. Right, so as I said, that one, we're going to block to the side, kidney punch, wrap the arm around, through, round the head, and then just squeeze. So again, that's kind of round their neck. So ideally I want the fold of this right there on their windpipe. Into your own elbow, round, and a squeeze. Okay, what I want to finish off with is 3 techniques that involve voiding, because I mentioned it when I was talking about Montserrat. So rather than blocking, we're just going to move out of the way of the attack. The most simple of these is actually the very first technique of this form, which is our chassé lateral basse. Okay? This technique. Doesn't look like a void, I know. But if I look at it sideways, my head moves from here and gives me about an extra half foot of distance. So if somebody's coming in with a punch, I can move my head out of the way of that punch so it doesn't have the range to hit me anymore. At the same time, I'm hitting them in the shin. And then I'm going to recover from that into a cross. Yeah? Move my head out the way, recover into a cross. So that means that somebody's coming in, they're coming in to hit you, they don't find the range, or it hurts their leg, and then you hit them in the face. Okay? So it's just a nice, simple little technique for getting out of the way. And again, you've got that kind of drop in, so you can really power home that technique. Trying to make sense of my own notes now. This is the problem. Oh, right, yeah. No, I remember this technique. This is another one that's going to require your imagination a little bit. So what I'm doing here is, as an attack comes in at me here, I'm going to step here. I'm going forward and off to one side. So if the line is here, yeah, you can keep that line in your vision. When I move, I am no longer on that line, so the punch or the kick misses. Okay, my foot is, I might take a bit of damage to my foot if it's a really low attack, but most of me is out the way. Once I've moved out the way, I'm going to just do a quick kick up through the middle. Okay, so step off line, kick through the middle line. It's just an avant chassé frontal. The reason for that is that if I've done a kick and the person is not there, this normally works, say I'm coming through with something like a verso chassé frontal. Big kick coming from the back leg, and I land. They're there, I come through and they move over there. As I'm landing, that's when that kick is coming up between my legs. So I land full force onto their foot coming up, and that ends a fight. They just keel over at that point. Okay, that's permanent damage to genitals kind of level of damage. So from that one, you're just going to step off, quick kick up, they're providing all of the rest of that force with the kick you dodged out of the way in the first place. The final one I want to look at, and I think I've done an uppercut on this one. Yes, I have. So we're going to look more at a Montserrat technique here. So still, I'm going to use our normal guard that we've been looking at. But what I want to do is when the punch is coming from my head, I want to keep this shoulder on the same line it is and put this shoulder on it. And by that I mean this shoulder moves forward to here. Okay? My head moves with it and the punch goes behind my head. So if the punch is coming here and I move, the punch goes behind my head. At the same time, I'm going to throw that lead fist out as a straight into their stomach. Okay, really simple boxing technique. I'm moving my head out of the way, getting in a hit. From there, I'm going to pass round with an uppercut again, coming into those kind of kidneys, trying to wind them, do some damage around the side. So I'm moving around them. So from there, down, round to the side, and I'm lined up straight for that cross coming through with that original hand. Okay, so from here, punch down, step round, cross coming through. So I'm hitting them in the chest as I'm dodging out the way, then in the kidneys, and as they bend over, that third one is coming in, crashing straight into the head. So all of these start with me defending myself. None of these I can do unless they are offensively doing something to me. And that's where I want to be. I want to be learning much more about what to do when somebody attacks me. Okay, some of these attacks are lethal and very brutal. But I didn't start anything. I am finishing it. Whereas the ones we looked at last week are what happens if things go on a bit. You might want to take the fight to them because it's going on. You might be somewhere where you're less worried about what people see you. No CCTV cameras, no audience, nobody with a video phone. You know, you might feel a bit more cavalier in your violence. But from our point of view in the philosophy of BAF, this is defensive martial art. So what you're looking for is when somebody attacks you, you defend and reply back. So, all of these things we've looked at today, you can now work into that shadow boxing we were talking about last time. So I can slip, and I can hit, and I can come back. Then go to a combo that I was looking at last week. These kind of things, back again. So I can start building whatever I want. What else did we look at? We did kind of slips across here, back again. I can start building all of that into that shadow boxing we looked at last time. I'm not going to go on about it because I am aware now that I've hit the hour mark, so I've been talking a lot. But I'm going to wrap up fairly soon, but just so you've got the idea, you can build that into your shadow boxing. I haven't heard anything, so I'm assuming there's not going to be any questions. If there are questions, I will either reply on the messages afterwards, or Michael will shout at me in a minute and ask me to answer things. So other than that, to give you an idea of where we're going, we've looked at the pugilism, we've looked at the Savate. The other two disciplines are jiu-jitsu and weapons. Now, as you've seen, jiu-jitsu is almost impossible to teach with just one person. So what we're going to move on to look at next week is I'm going to introduce you to the cane. Next week, these will be our implements of choice. So if you are following along at home, find yourself a cane or walking stick, anything that's about 3 foot in length, and about an inch or so wide, maybe a bit narrower. So we'll be going on to look at walking stick and how we're going to use that as a weapon, and that's what we're looking at next week. So we've got a walking stick form. I'm going to introduce you to some of that, and we're also going to be looking a bit about how you actually use the cane, some warm-up exercises, really give you an introduction to a walking stick as a weapon. That's the plan for next week. So other than that, your homework, you've now got 2 forms. Practice your forms, you will learn the muscle memory, you'll learn the individual techniques. Throw them together in your shadow boxing. You're going to look rubbish. I look rubbish when I'm doing shadow boxing. You've just seen me do some of it. You saw me doing some in the last video. But the more you practice it, the better you'll get. And you're starting to put that not just as muscle memory for specific sequences, you're starting to vary it up, and it will help you all when you get to that level of actual sparring and things. So that's your homework. If you want homework, practice your forms, practice your shadow boxing. Just try and run through each form a couple of times a day, 5 minutes of shadow boxing, and you'll feel like a new person by the time we roll around to next week. Now it looks like we're going to have this extended quarantine going on until, certainly looks like the beginning of June now, so I'm going to have a few more of these to do with you, but next week we're going to be looking at cane, so that's what we're going to be moving on to. So really, that's all I've got to cover today. I'm aware I've run over, so I'm going to finish up now anyway, and we shall finish as we always do with falling out. So, from attention, and fall out. Okay, thank you very much for joining us today. Hopefully we'll see you again next week. If you have any questions, just throw them up in this chat. I'll answer them on the same feed. Other than that, feel free to spread this video around, tell other people about what we're doing. You know, we're just trying to keep people's interest going whilst we go through this time where we all have to be alone. Other than that, have a great week, stay safe, and above all, be kind, okay? Take care.